Hello, this is Mel. This is our third and final video of the 48RE transmission overhaul. So far we have torn everything down. We've been through several of the components and made checks and found out what kind of parts we were going to need for it. So now we're going to go ahead and put it all back together. In the process, we'll be cleaning some of the parts before we put them back in, or actually all the parts before we put them back in. We've already been through the valve body, and that was in the second video. So altogether we've had 3 videos that takes you from the beginning to the end of this transmission overhaul. I'd like to thank you for watching with me, and if you would, please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button, and we'll try to have some more in the future. Thanks for watching. Let's get started. We're going to start out by putting our overdrive assembly together. So I've mounted the output shaft into my vise, and I'm going to replace the thrust bearing and also the double roller sprag assembly with new parts. So I've cleaned up the hub assembly and also the gear assembly, and we're going to put this all together and put it into the output shaft. I'm going to take some trans gel and lubricate the area where the rollers will go. We're going to position our roller bearing into position on the hub assembly. So if you'll notice, there is a little ledge right here on one side of the roller bearing, which you do not have on the other side. So you want to make sure that that little ledge right there sits down in the little groove that's right here in the gear. So I'm going to position that down on there for now. And it goes all the way down until it seats this part of the sprag assembly into the groove. Now we have our thrust bearing. Has 2 sides on it. It'll go on either way, but there's only one right way. So the side that turns like that, the flat side of the bearing, goes down first on the hub assembly. So again, we're going to put some gel on there. This will do 2 things. It'll help keep the bearing in place, it'll lubricate it, and it'll also keep this roller bearing from falling off as we put it down into the output shaft. So I'm going to work it around into the bearing so it'll go down in there. I'm going to flip it over and put it onto the hub assembly. So we're going to take our hub assembly now, and I've lubricated everything real good down inside, also around all the bearings, and put some ATF in it. Everything should be well lubricated. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my snap ring pliers and I'm going to grab a hold of it on the inside just like we took it out. And we're going to place it down in the race in the output shaft. And as we do that, we're going to try to hold it straight and going to wiggle it around a little bit and spin it a little bit as we go in with it. Got to make sure that it goes all the way down. And sits into place. So once you get it installed, it should turn to the left, but it should not turn to the right. So we're going to check that now. Okay, it does spin to the left. Try and turn it to the right, it locks. So that's working as it should. Next we have our planetary gear assembly, which we're going to be installing. And that will fit into the internal gear against the gears in the planetary assembly. So we're just going to take it and kind of slide it down in there, and you're going to have to work it around a little bit just to get it lined up with the gears. Until it seats all the way down. Next we'll be putting in our sun gear assembly, but I wanted to show you I'm going to replace both the sun gear and the spring plate. If you look into the spring plate, you will notice, if you can see them, right here, see these little groove marks? They shouldn't be there. If you spin it around on the other side, it's nice and smooth. Over here, it's got the marks in it. That's because this sun gear has pressure put on it, and it causes it sometimes to wiggle back and forth because of maybe a little uneven pressure on the spring plate. So I'm replacing both of these units with new ones. When you spin it on there, it would kind of bind up. And so I just decided to replace both of them. So I have the new sun gear here. I put the new spring plate. The only thing I used over on it was the snap ring to hold it in place. So we're going to install the sun gear into the planetary after we put a little lubricant on the gears. And you'll do that by just placing it in there and kind of give it a little twisting motion. Got to get it lined up with the gears. It goes all the way down. Should spin freely. After putting the sun gear in, next we're going to take our alignment shaft. And this is a tool we bought. You can get them online. And we're going to slide them right down through the sun gear, wiggle it around until you can hear it bottom out. That aligns all the splines down through there. If you don't do that, when you go to put this back onto the tail shaft housing, it just might not go on. You end up having to take it back apart. Next, we're going to put the spring for the overdrive and put it down on the spring seat. As you can see, I've loaded the overdrive assembly back into the press, so we'll have the proper tools in order to compress a spring. So the next thing we're going to do is to load our clutches in, our hub assembly. So we're going to go ahead and put that in next. If you'll notice, there's some little protrusions right here at the end of this hub assembly. So you have to make sure you get the right backing plate on, you need the lower backing plate, which is this plate right here. And it has the little cutout right here that goes down in these protrusions. So that side is going to go on first. And I'm going to turn it upside down, and you can see that it's flush with the bottom of it. So we're going to put the hub assembly over the top of the spring and sit it down in place. Now you're going to have to make sure that it goes down on the spline, so you're going to have to wiggle it around and feel of it a little bit. It's got to drop into the splines, making sure everything is centered up. You can tell when it drops in, it kind of clicks, and you'll have a little feeling of it back and forth. Okay. So now we're ready to load our clutches up and our steel plates. So the first thing we're going to need is a clutch to go onto the first plate. So we're going to place those all in. There is 10 of the clutch disc, and I have new steels to go in on this, so we'll be placing the steels and the clutch plates in alternatively. Need to remember to soak your clutch discs for at least 30 minutes in transmission fluid before you install them. And this is our final plate that we put in, the upper plate, and the groove on it will go up I'm going to line up all the steels and the clutch plates so they'll be in line with the outer assembly, and will go down into place when we press it in. We may have to make some little adjustments as we go, but we want to start out with them as close as we can get it. Okay, so I put both of my snap rings in place, making sure that we've got them all. We've got hub assembly, got the little wire snap ring down in here, we got all our clutch plates and our clutch disc, so we're ready at this point. Got the press tool up in here, and we're going to begin to press it down and put the snap rings in. Okay, so we've got it pressed down to a point where our plate's down below the groove there, and our sun gear is groove is showing for the top snap ring. So we're going to go ahead and see if we can get those in place. Just walking it around. making sure that it's seated all the way around. And we're going to put our upper wire type snap ring. And you can pretty well put it in with your fingers and it pops right into place. With our snap rings in place, we can release the pressure on the press. And let the snap rings seat. I have removed the overdrive gear train assembly from the press and I've installed it in the tail shaft housing. I slid it in and I made sure that in the back where the rear bearing is that the snap ring has gone into place, clipped in, put a new gasket and the cover back on the outside of the housing. So the first thing we're going to do is install the flat snap ring into place. I've turned it around a little bit to get it out of the open area and the open ends up here at the top. So next we're going to install the waved snap ring. It goes in the same groove. You can hear it snap into place. After the wave snap ring is in place, we're going to install the backing plate. Pushing it all the way back till it's seated. And then alternately we will put the friction plates and then the steel plates in place. Friction and a steel. Friction and a steel. And we'll keep doing this until we have put all 5 frictions plates in and all the steel plates. After that, we will put our snap ring in that is a wire type. That's just used to hold this all in place. Now the gear train is completely installed into the tail shaft housing. We're going to leave our shaft in here and we're going to put it to the side and we'll be ready to install it onto the rear of the transmission as soon as we get the front built, which is what we're going to do now. Okay, the next thing we have to go in our case is the planetary gear train system. So I have it laid out here. We're going to assemble it together and get it ready to go into the case. So first of all, we have our thrust washers in place on both sides of our planetary gear. We're going to slip it into the external ring gear just like that. And then we're going to take the shell, which we already have our thrust plate, our sun gear all assembled in place. We've had some lubricant on the gear. I'm going to add a little bit of ATF down here to the gears. Give everything some lubricant. Then we're going to drop this down into the planetary gear, the sun gear, down into the planetary. Just like that. Okay, next we're going to take the other planetary gear set. We have the thrust washer in place on it. Also, there is a sleeve that goes on there. Got to make sure that that's in place. We're going to assemble it onto the external gear. And then we will drop it into, which we already have the thrust plate in the bottom of the shell, lubricated and ready to go in. And then we'll be dropping it in. We're going to put some ATF on these gears. And then we'll drop it into place. Everything feels smooth. And the next thing, we'll be putting our intermediate shaft back into the gear train. So we will lubricate the areas where it rides. Next, we'll put the intermediate shaft through the planetary system, slide it down into place. Until it bottoms out. We'll flip it around. And next we will put our snap ring on to the end of it. Making sure that it snaps down into the groove. And then next we will put this assembly into our case. We will take our completed gear train assembly and put it back into the case. And you want to make sure that you support that good as you push it in so you don't nick up any of the surfaces where the bearings run. Next, we're going to put our front clutch assembly back together. And the first thing we're going to do is install a new seal that goes around the inner hub assembly there. So I've got my new seals out of the kit. We're going to put some lubricant on them. You want to make sure that the lip on this seal always goes down. So you've got an area right here that has a little lip on it. You want to make sure that that seal goes down. And as you put this seal in, you want to make sure that the seal does not roll over when you put it in. So I usually just stick it in on one side and just kind of roll it around, making sure that that lip does not roll as I put it in. Now we're going to take our piston. We also have a place for a seal to go onto it, right around the lip of the piston. And as always, the lip on the seal always goes down. So we're going to put some lubricant on this as well. And then we're going to take this seal and we're going to do just like we did with the other one. We're going to sit it down in there with the lip facing down. And then we're just going to walk it all the way around. Making sure that it doesn't flip around on us. So you want to kind of form it up, make sure that it is in the proper position. So with the seals all in place, we're going to drop the piston down into the drum. So line it up, and with a little down pressure, you want to kind of just rock it back and forth till it pops into place. Okay, that is all the way down. It has bottomed out, and so with that in place, now we can go ahead and put our clutches and steels. I have my new clutches here that I've been soaking for 30 minutes or so. And I have my steels here that I'm going to use over. So they're going to alternate steel, then clutch. So we're going to go ahead and put them in. The shiny side goes up. You can see the little rings around this one where it sat on the piston before. So I'm going to put it back down like it was. So we put a steel in and a clutch. A steel and a clutch. And we keep doing that until we've got it all installed. And then we end up with our top plate. So we're going to put the shiny side down on it. It's the way it was before. And then next we can get our snap ring, and we'll just start it on one side and walk it all the way around. And you can kind of hear it pop as it jumps into the little groove where the snap ring goes. With the snap ring in place, I'm going to pull up, and as you can see, there's a good bit of clearance in this front clutch assembly, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But we're going to measure it to make sure that it is within the specification. And according to the book, the specification is 98 thousandths for a minimum and 160 thousandths for a maximum. So I've taken several feeler gauges and put them together, and I've come up with about a middle range, which is 129 thousandths. So we're going to take it and just slip it right under the edge of the snap ring, between the snap ring and the plate, and kind of have to force it in there, but that is a nice tight fit, and it's right in the middle of the range for the specification. Next, we're going to put our springs back in place. There's 9 of them, and so we're going to put them out in the same configuration they were. So we're going to put 3 in. We're going to skip 2. We're going to put 3 more in. Going to skip 2, and then we're going to put the last 3 in. So now we have all 9 springs in place. 3, skip 2, 3, skip 2, 3, skip 2. At this point, we're going to put our spring plate on top of the springs. And next we're going to assemble our press tool, and we're going to put the snap ring on. So I've got my spring compressor installed, and I have my nut on the back of it that I'm going to spin around, which is going to compress the spring plate and the springs and allow us to put the snap ring back in place. So I'm just going to compress this down. Making sure that everything stays straight. And I believe that will be enough. So I can see the little groove all the way around. I'm going to take our snap ring and put it around. Let it drop into place. Okay, with the snap ring all popped into place, we can release our compressor. You want to make sure that the snap ring is in the groove, properly in place, and that it's inside all the little tabs that are sticking out there. I've put our rear clutch housing up into the holder, and first thing we're going to install in our rear clutch housing is the thrust washer. If you notice, it has 2 little grooves in it. Those grooves face up. And it has 3 tabs that need to go down into the tab cutouts made inside the housing. Lubricated with Trans Gel. I'm going to slide that into place. Then the next thing we'll be doing is we will take the piston assembly, and we're going to remove the seals that are in it now and install some new seals. So we've got 2 seals, an outer and an inner seal. So we're just going to take the pick and get this started. Noticing which way the groove goes. So here's the inner seal. And we'll go ahead and remove the outer seal. Both grooves are facing down. We'll grab our new seals to put in. Okay, I've gotten both of the seals out of our kit. I'm going to start with the outer seal. Place it in the groove with the lip facing down. Going to hold one edge of it and walk it around, sliding the seal into the groove. Once you get it in the groove, you just want to slide your fingers all the way around it. Make sure that the seal has not flipped over, and form it to the piston. Okay, we're going to do the same thing with the inner seal. Again, making sure that it is formed into the groove all the way around. We're going to take our piston and put it into the housing. Going to take a little seal tool and kind of walk the seal in around very carefully, to making sure we don't cut the seals, the inner and the outer. Putting just a little bit of down pressure on it. And at the same time giving it a little twist, and it goes down, pops right into place. Next, we'll put our spring plate in. And then we have a plastic spacer. And then we have a waved snap ring. You need to take a look once you get the snap ring in place and make sure that it is fit all the way down into the grooves. If not, you may have to go back and press it down a little bit all the way around, because this has got a exaggerated wave in this snap ring, and sometimes it's just a little difficult to put in. Okay, next we're going to put our backing plate into the bottom. Going to make sure that the flat side is facing up. And then we will start putting our friction plates and our steel plates in, alternating between the two. So we're going to put our friction and then a steel. There are a total of 3 friction plates in this clutch pack and 4 steels. And then last will be our backing plate for the top, so you need to make sure that the shiny side goes down. And then the last thing we have to go in is our snap ring. The last thing we're going to do to this clutch pack on this side of it is we're going to take the feeler blade and we're going to run it up under the snap ring and see what our clearances are. Okay, that is a 28 thousandths, and it is pretty snug to go in, so I can get the 29 in it, but I'm pretty much having to force it, so we're like 29 or 30 thousandths. The specification is 25 to 36, so we're right in the middle of the range. If we were out on it, this snap ring on top has a selective size. You can get them different thicknesses if your measurement was not correct. Okay, I've taken the rear clutch housing, taken it out of the holding fixture, and we have put it back on the workbench. And we're going to install the thrust washer on first. This particular one is a number 2. We're going back with the number 2. Next we have 3 sealing rings. In the bottom we have a metal ring, and in the top we have 2 fiber rings. So we're going to remove them. And both of these are just a butt together ring. They're the same size, and the bottom ring is a hook ring, so I'm going to see if we can get it to unhook. And we will install new rings in the place of these old rings. Okay, I've located our steel ring and our 2 Teflon rings out of our kit, and we're going to install them now. And we'll need to hook them back into place. Okay, once you get that locked into place, you got to make sure that they're locked in properly. Sometimes they can be a little difficult to do. Now we're going to put our 2 Teflon seals on. and get them popped into place. I'm going to take the rear clutch assembly, and we've got our thrust washer in place, and we're going to set it down into the transmission case. Going to have to line it up with the clutch splines, so you need to wiggle it around until it seats all the way down. You can kind of hear it, that thud that it makes. That way you know it's all the way down. And also the edge of the shell where it's cut out will be even with the drum part. Okay, now after that we have our thrust washer in place that's going to go up against the front drum, and we're going to do it just like we did the rear drum. I'm going to set it down on there. Wiggle it, turn it until it's all the way down into the notches. And that looks good as well. Okay, next we're going to drop in our band assembly, and we're going to put it in over here where the cutout is. And then we'll be able to push it down and spin it around to where it will be able to hook up the struts on it. In the center position. The next thing we're going to do is to put in our oil pump assembly. And the first of that would be to install the gasket. So I'm going to put a little bit of lubricant around the sides here where the seal around the outside of the oil pump goes. After that, we're going to take our gasket, line our large holes up down in the case, and drop it in place. Making sure that all the bolt holes and all the oil passages are in the proper place. Putting a little ATF down here where the stator is going to ride. So we have our oil pump here, and I'm going to lubricate the rings around the outside seal. I'll give it a double check, and the rings around the stator. We're going to line up these holes just like we did with the gasket and drop it in place. Okay, so I've got all of that lubricated now. Just going to flip it over and line up my holes. Going to take out one of my drivers and just kind of make sure they're exactly lined up with the holes. Make sure everything is in the proper position. Kind of And now we're ready to put our bolts in. So we have 7 bolts that's going to go in it. I put new sealing washers on each one. So we'll start all those by hand. Okay, to make sure the pump's all the way down, I just like to take and push on it. You can also look from the back side to make sure that the bottom of the pump is seated against the case. So I'm going to loosely, in a crisscross pattern, tighten each one of these up. Going over them twice. And I'll end up torquing each one of the bolts to 15 foot-pounds or 180 inch-pounds if you're using the inch-pound torque wrench. So first I've set my torque wrench to 90 inch-pounds. And I'm going to go again in a crisscross pattern, not tightening them to the full torque until I have tightened them a little bit at a time. That way I know it's going down evenly. Okay, now I'm going to up it. To 120 inch-pounds. And then up to my final torque of 180. So 180 inch-pounds will be my final torque. So that completes the torquing of the front oil pump. I've put the transmission up on the workbench, and we're going to replace 3 seals in it. One in this cooler line, one that goes in this cooler line, and also the one that goes in the case where the valve body stem comes up through it. So I'm going to take this pick and I'm going to go in here where the cooler line attaches, and there's a seal in each one of these lines. There's one, and then on the back one we've got one. Just kind of have to take your pick and roll them out. So we got 2 O-rings, and then I'm going to see if I can take my screwdriver and just pop that seal out. It comes out pretty easy. So there's the 3 seals that we're going to replace, and I've got them out of my transmission kit. Here's the new one that goes in the case here. We'll put this one in first. I'm going to go ahead and put a little lubricant inside there. Okay, so I've got all that done. Should be able to put that in and just tap it in. Okay, and we got the two O-rings. Just be able to put them into the back side of the fitting. That seal right there is kind of noted for leaking once it's been in there for a good while. So this is the time to replace them. Okay. I've turned the transmission over, and now we're going to proceed to replacing the 3 servos. We're going to start with the rear band servo, the reverse servo, and I'm also upgrading the reverse band servo. I'm replacing with a Superior Super Servo. It is a billet aluminum and steel. The 2 Teflon rings are used for piston support in the chamber, and then you have 1 sealing a ring around the bottom. So we're going to lubricate this and see if we can put them down into the bore. You want to make sure that you do it gently as not to damage any of the seals or the rings. Okay, so I've bottomed it all the way out. And next we're going to put in the spring off the original servo, and we're going to put in our spring retainer. We're going to put the snap ring in. The next piston we have to install is the 1 to 2 accumulator, and it is a plastic piston with a sealing ring at each end, and we're also going to replace it with a billet piston as well, which has 2 sealing rings at the top and 2 sealing rings at the bottom. So we're going to lubricate that and put it into place. And then we'll put the spring that came off of the old one back on top. Next, we're going to put in our low and reverse band pivot arm. So it's going to sit in just like that, and it has a pin, this pin that holds it in. It goes right in this hole right here through the case. It has 2 O-rings on the end of it. Next, we'll make our low and reverse band adjustment. We're going to spin the adjusting screw down in there. Make sure that the lock nut is loose. And then I have my torque wrench set at 72 inch-pounds. And then with it torqued to 72 inch-pounds, we're going to back it off 3 full turns. It's 1, 2, and 3. And we'll tighten our lock nut down. And then we'll make a final torque on the band adjusting nut to 25 foot-pounds. So I've got my torque wrench set at 25 foot-pounds, and I've also marked the top of it with this bolt hole right here, so I would know if it turns when I'm making the final torque. Looks good. So that's our final adjustment. Our last servo that we're going to be putting in is the front servo for the intermediate band. So again, I have a updated shift servo that is supposed to be better than the original. It's a billet servo, and it's made by Superior. So it comes with the servo piston, which has a sealing ring at the top, a sealing ring at the bottom. It has a sleeve which has 2 seals on it, and it comes with a different type of band. It's made a little bit stronger than the original. It has these upward areas on it that gives it strength, so we'll be using that as well. So the first thing, it says to lubricate the sleeve and put it in first. So I'm going to grab our lubricant. And I like to use a little drift. It's actually a seal driver, but I've made it to where it fits really good, and it helps me to center it up with the bore and make sure that it's going in straight. And you want to hear that solid sound, that way you know that it is all the way in. And next we will be putting in the piston. So we're going to lubricate the inside of the sleeve where this seal will ride, and also both of the rings. So next we'll slide that in. we slid that in till it's all the way down. Next we'll be installing the spring, and this is a spring out of the original servo, and also the spring retainer will be one that we used before that was already in the transmission, and it looks like an original one. So I guess we better lubricate this. And this is a stout spring here, so I'll be using the aid of a spring compressor to put it on. I'm going to add a spacer right up here, which will allow the pin to come up through as we press it into place. Got to make sure that it centers up. So we got to turn the compressor down until it's clearing the groove for the snap ring. And next we'll put the snap ring in place. And then release the compressor. With the intermediate servo in place now, we're going to install our struts to the band. So we're going to place it right there on that side of the band. And we're going to be taking our new one that we got in our kit, and we're going to put it in place. And then we're going to tighten this band up to 72 inch-pounds. And then the book says to back it off 1 3/4 of a turn. Make sure that your lock nut doesn't tighten first. Okay, so we got that torqued to 72 inch-pounds. Going to take the tool, and we're going to kind of mark where we're at right here. And we're going to turn it off 1 3/4 of a turn. So there's 1 3/4. Going to tighten the lock nut down. While holding it still with the other wrench, so it doesn't turn on me. And I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to put a little mark right here on the center stud. And then I'm going to come down here and mark straight across from it on the case. We'll use those marks to make sure that it does not turn on me when I put the final torque on it. So I'm going to be torquing it to 30 foot-pounds. And I'm going to check my mark, and it's still pretty much right where I left it. Next, we'll be putting our piston into the overdrive for the overdrive section. So the seals are removed. I have the two new seals to put in them. So we're going to lubricate them and put them in place. The lip on the seals go down, or in this case up, but the piston goes in this way, so that would make it be going down into the case. Make sure that it's all formed correctly, and the seal's going in the right direction. That looks good. And this will be the outer seal. Again, putting the lip around to where it is facing down into the case. And make sure that it is formed all the way around, that it hadn't flipped around on us. Both of them look good. Now we will put it around the shaft and into the case. Make sure that these two protrusions on the back side of the piston go into the two holes that are in the case assembly. Giving a little help to the seal to make sure that it goes around the sealing area properly. With the inner seal around the mating surface properly, you should be able to twist it back and forth, and it'll stop in either direction. That lets you know that your protrusions on the back of the pistons are in the hole properly. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on the piston and kind of twist it sideways as pressuring it. And while holding it in, I'm going to take the lip tool and just check and make sure that it is going in properly, not rolling. popped into place there. Making sure it's still in the pins. Pushing it till it bottoms out. At this point, we're ready to put our overdrive unit onto the back of the case. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the selective snap ring that we picked out earlier from our measurements, and we're going to put a good amount of lubricant on it, which also will serve as a almost like a paste in order to keep it up in place. So it's going to go onto the overdrive piston. And then we'll put a little bit on the outside of it as well. We're going to put our gasket up in place. Going to do the same thing with it. We're going to put some lubricant on it to hold it up in place. And we'll slip it onto the back of the transmission case. Lining it up with the bolt holes. We're going to put our thrust bearing onto the overdrive unit. Making sure you put that in the right direction. Going to work a little ATF down into the edges of the bearings so it can get into the where the actual bearing rollers are. And then we're going to sit it into the overdrive unit. You'll notice the little lip on the inside is facing out towards the transmission case. That makes it fit around the ring properly. We're going to pull out our alignment shaft that we installed earlier. And now we're ready to set it up onto the housing. I'm going to put lubricant where each one of the races are. Okay, I put a couple of bolts in here to keep my alignment straight as I push it in, and I put a couple of shorter ones in here that I'm going to use to finish pulling it up flush. Kind of going back and forth between the two bolts to pull it up evenly. Okay, I have the tail shaft slid all the way up into the place. I put a couple of bolts in it to pull it up the last 1/4 inch. I'll be taking the Loctite 242 and putting on the bolts, and then we'll torque them all down. We'll run them all down until they're up against the tail shaft housing, but not torqued down yet. All the bolts are installed now, and I've got my torque wrench set to 25 foot-pounds. So we'll be torquing those. Okay, I'm going to be installing the valve body now, and the first thing we're going to do is push the rod to shift it into park in first. You get slide it in and push it down in place. As long as you've got it slid all the way in and you move it back and forth and you can feel that it's moving freely, you should be good. So we will put that back on the valve body as soon as we get it installed. We'll be installing it now, and we're going to put it up here in a little bit of an angle. Just going to kind of leave it sitting up on the side a little bit in order to be able to put the rod back in place. So right here is the hole where we're going to be putting the rod up in place. You put a flashlight on it, maybe you can see it a little better. Okay, this is the hole, and this is the rod right down in here. I'm going to reach in there and grab it with my pickup tool. I'll pull it forward and see if we can push it up in the hole. Just like that. Going to leave that sitting there. I'm going to take my screwdriver, push up on it to get it all the way up in there. And then we're going to grab our E-clip. And I'm going to get a pair of needle nose and slide that right into place in the groove on the pin. Okay, so we're going to take the E-clip on pair of needle nose and just slip right in there and push it right into place. We'll remove our pickup tool from it. And now we can set the valve body back down in place. Okay. Got 3 different size bolts. So the short ones go on the short area of the valve body lands. We'll start them all by hand first. It's another short one. The third short one. And the 4 longest ones go over here by the governor. and the 3 middle-sized bolts. One goes here, and the last 2 go right over here. So I'm going to start on the side and go back and forth. And before I finish the final torque, I'm going to install the linkage piece for the shifter. And we'll try and make sure that the shifter is working properly before we go too far. Okay, looks like it's working okay. I'm going to check and make sure that the output shaft won't move when it's in park. So I've pulled it all the way back into the park position, and it should not turn either way. And you can actually hear it rocking back and forth, so it is working properly. Now we'll torque the valve body bolts to the final torque. Now the valve body bolts torque to 100 inch-pounds. Going to do this progressively, so I'm putting it around 50, which is about halfway. We're going to go up to the final torque of 100 inch-pounds. So that has all the valve body bolts torqued down. Next, we're going to put on our filter assembly. It already has a gasket made on it. So, I'm going to place it up here just like this. Now run them up. I got my torque wrench set to 35 inch-pounds. And now we'll be putting our pan gasket on. And we'll set our pan up there. Good. We'll put all our bolts in. final torque on the pan bolts is 120 inch-pounds. And that completes the torquing of the pan bolts. Okay, next we'll be putting in a new output shaft speed sensor. Goes right in here. It torques 20 foot-pounds. Okay, next we're putting in our push-in range sensor. Put a new seal on it. And it has 2 Torx head bolts or screws. Which torque to 45 inch-pounds. Next is our throttle valve actuator. Has a little D section on it, and then it's got 2 bolts that hold it in. And it torques to 75 inch-pounds. So the last thing we've got to put in is our torque converter, and we're going to pre-fill it with 2 quarts of ATF. Okay, I think I got about 1.5 quarts. I didn't get quite 2 quarts in it. But we're going to go ahead and slide it into the bell housing. Okay, looks like we're done with this transmission. Getting ready to put it back in. Just a little side note, I want to let you know that this torque converter sticks out farther than the housing, about 19 or 20 millimeter. And I've measured it in the truck. That seems about just perfect. Where most of them set inside, this one doesn't. It extends out about 19, 20 millimeter. So don't do like I did and take it in and out about 4 or 5 times trying to seat it, because you have it already in, and you can hear the 2 little tabs where it's hitting on the gears. Thanks for watching my videos. Hope you got something out of it. This is the first one of these I've done. It's in my home vehicle, and I hope that I didn't mislead anybody anyway, but this was how I did my transmission, and seemed to have worked out pretty well. If you could, like my videos and subscribe to the channel. In the future, I'll try to do a few more. Thank you.